sanctuary of Lot during the destruction of Sodom? Archaeologists followed the trail laid out on the map, which led them directly to the ruins of an ancient church built in the 7th century CE. The tiles in the ruin directly label the church as the Sanctuary of Holy Lot. And archaeologists found one other fascinating detail.
The church with a central nave and 2 aisles. One of the northern aisle has a small cave at the end of it.
The cave seems to match the Bible's description of Lot's refuge, a hillside sanctuary outside the lost city of Zoar. This cave may not be the smoking gun that definitely proves the story of Lot, but it is tantalizing evidence.
2 separate sources from the 7th century were interpreting this area as Saint Lot's sanctuary. So at least they believe that Lot was living in this area, and this is very important. The fact that we have Middle Bronze occupation here, inside the cave, the fact that we have some burials outside, the fact that this site is only 1 kilometer to the northeast of Zoar, these all circumstantial evidence for people living here, and maybe Lot himself was living here.
But if the biblical story is correct, then the ruins of Sodom itself should be near the ruins of ancient Zoar. Archaeological teams came to the same conclusion with astonishing results. Since the 1970s, archaeologists have uncovered 4 different Bronze Age cities that eerily match the 4 cities the Bible says God destroyed with Sodom. And the city that corresponds most closely with the biblical city of Sodom is Bab-edh-Ra, on the shore of the Dead Sea, 50 miles from Jerusalem. In the Bronze Age, the period of the Bible's Lot, Bab-edh-Ra was an independent walled city.
We have cities surrounded by villages and agricultural land and so on, and every city was independent, so it was kind of city-state.
Bab-edh-Ra at its height was home to 1,000 citizens.
You study the artifacts in the houses, and you will start to think this was a kitchen, and this was a working area, and this was a reception hall, or whatever.
The earliest archaeologists also made one disturbing discovery at Bab-edh-Ra: mass graves.
People were impressed by the number of the tombs here. According to different calculations, there were 20,000 people buried here. And for such small site, it's a huge graveyard.
The earliest burials date from approximately 3000 BCE. The enormous number of tombs suggested an ancient Sodom-like catastrophe. And there is other tantalizing evidence of fiery destruction.
During the archaeological excavation, there were some areas with ashes.
In fact, the archaeological records show that at one point the city of Bab-edh-Ra was suddenly abandoned, its remnants lying untouched right where they fell until uncovered in recent decades. Bab-edh-Ra bears remarkable similarities to biblical Sodom, including its early Bronze Age remnants. But is it the literal city of Lot, destroyed by God's fiery wrath in the Bible? The key to connecting Bab-edh-Ra to biblical Sodom may lie in this small disk, found 600 miles to the east in the ruins of ancient Nineveh. Was Sodom really destroyed by fire from the sky, as the Bible claims? The secret to this mystery may lie here. In the storerooms of the venerable British Museum, in the collection of artifacts from the ancient Middle East, discovered in the mid-1800s, lies a small clay disc. The purpose of the disc is mysterious. It is an artifact of the ancient Sumerian culture that once flourished in what is now modern-day Iraq. Sumeria was the dominant culture of the early Bronze Age, from 3000 BCE to 2000 BCE, with major cities at Kish and Ur, and power stretching to the Mediterranean. The Sumerian disk is covered with ancient cuneiform that seems to be a chart of the night sky above ancient Sumeria.
We know that it deals with astronomy because it has a number of constellation drawings which we can identify, and because it has a lot of astronomical names that we know from other works.
Among the recognizable constellations are Gemini, Pisces, and the planets Mercury and Jupiter. Astronomer Mark Himsel and engineer Alan Bond both found themselves intrigued with the Sumerian planisphere. They decided to attempt a translation by applying their expertise in astronomy and mechanical engineering. The translation slowly began to reveal that the ancient Sumerians were well versed in astronomy.
It is a very sophisticated interpretation of the night sky, which shows that we're dealing with a professional astronomer who knows his trade and not just somebody who's looking at the night sky and guessing.
Some of the features suggest that he was using instruments to measure angles and to observe things.
We think that it's bowl-shaped because he probably had the wet clay he was writing on in a bowl in his hand. It's a sort of like a portable notebook. And he's recording things like clouds, position of planets, the sort of thing that an observer of the sky would be recording.
But there is one sector that has remained mysterious since its discovery.
The planisphere shows the region of Pisces and a dotted line, for want of a better description, crossing the sky. And it indicates an object which was quite alien in terms of their interpretation of it. The astronomer couldn't make out whether it was a star or a planet.
Bond and Hemsel believed the translation could mean only one thing: an asteroid.
The object would have first been seen in the constellation of Pisces, which he calls Apis. It then goes across the sky through Pegasus down to Aquila and then goes over the horizon. Meteorites and shooting stars move very, very quickly across the sky. However, in this case, the astronomer is seeing it when it is out in space. It's moving across the sky at the same sort of apparent speed as a high-flying aircraft. So he sees it for about 4.5 minutes.
In fact, the ancient astronomer is so exact in his details that the track of the object can actually be traced thousands of years later.
That line across the sky is drawn against the star background accurately enough for us to plot the trajectory of the object. And it turns out if you run that trajectory backwards, it's an asteroid of a type we know. It's in an orbit which is called an Aten orbit.
Only in the 1970s did modern astronomers discover Aten-class asteroids, which orbit the Sun between the Earth and Venus. They range in size from 100 feet across to over a mile. The ancient Sumerian observation clearly matches the findings of modern high-tech astronomy. Did a Sumerian astronomer observe the asteroid that destroyed ancient Sodom? Could this be the explanation for the Bible's description of fire from the sky? The answer may lie not only in the planisphere and the book of Genesis, but in computer modeling of the ancient night sky. The fiery end of Sodom and Gomorrah may be corroborated by a single artifact, the Sumerian planisphere. It accurately details the positions of the stars, planets, and constellations of the night sky, and describes a strange object resembling an asteroid. Astronomers Alan Bond and Mark Hemsel believe they have translated the planisphere correctly and have traced the actual impact site of the asteroid.
We make the assumption that the astronomer is standing somewhere in southern Iraq. Therefore, from the information on the planisphere, we can construct a trajectory, a trial trajectory, derived from software that is used for predicting rocket ascent trajectories and re-entry trajectories.
But there's a bizarre twist. The data at first seems to have no connection to the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah. When that trajectory is traced forward, it strikes a strange target for a Bible disaster. Not in Israel, but in northern Europe.
The object hit the Austrian Alps at a place called Kofels in the Elytz Valley.
According to Bond and Hemsel, there is no meteor crater in Kofels, Austria, because the asteroid exploded in an airburst several hundred meters above the ground. It has happened before, in Tunguska, Siberia.
In 1908, there was a near-Earth object impact in Tunguska, Siberia, which is well known, and devastating area about 50 kilometers, and was an airburst explosion. This object that we're dealing with is 1,000 times greater.
Like the Tunguska asteroid, the biblical era event involved a massive airburst.
The asteroid itself was already in the process of disintegration. That's the reason that there is no actual crater.
And the biblical destruction did not come from this impact, but from the aftermath.
The object, when it hit Kofels, must have produced a massive plume. And this plume is what we suspect explains the myth of Sodom and Gomorrah.
By applying data models from astronomy and weapons research, Bond and Hemsel have created a minute-by-minute scenario for the asteroid strike and its effects on the planet. The 1¼ kilometer asteroid descended toward Earth in a low trajectory, observed in Sumeria and the Dead Sea. It entered the atmosphere over Greece, turning into a fireball as it crossed Europe, finally erupting in an airburst over the Alps. 100 times larger than the world's most powerful nuclear weapon. The explosion on Kofels would have created a mushroom cloud of rock, dirt, and earth. A massive plume of debris that arcs into the sky for hundreds of miles along the asteroid's trajectory.
Billions of tons would have been ejected back at maybe 5 kilometers per second out across the Mediterranean. And we'd expect the plume to probably go up 900 kilometers.
From there, the debris begins to fall back to Earth, dropping in a broad swath 1,500 miles away from the blast site, centered on the Dead Sea.
When these plumes re-enter the atmosphere, having arced into space, what they do is they friction heat the atmosphere. And for about a second, the ground temperature goes to 400 degrees.
Anybody that was directly under the re-entry of the plume would have ignited instantly. Hair, clothing, exposed flesh would all have gone. Anybody out there would have suffered horrific burns and would have died pretty much straight away within the hour. Probably an extremely unpleasant death.
There would be few survivors in a massive plume re-entry radius centered on the Dead Sea. In fact, the data on the planisphere is so accurate that Bond and Hempsel believed they could find the exact date of the observation.